Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. Before we kick off this week's episode, just a quick ask. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to make sure that you never miss an episode, never miss out on any of the strategies and tactics that we're sharing to help you continue charting your own path to freedom. And if you'd like to go deeper with any of this, we've launched a free Facebook group, which you can join at pathtofreedom.com/group. And we've linked that in the show notes to make it easy for you to find. All right. Thank you again for being here. Let's drop in to the episode. Hey, what's up, everyone? And welcome back to the Path to Freedom podcast. Today, I'm going to do something a little different. This is the first installment in a new segment I've been wanting to do where I'm basically just going to spotlight different franchise opportunities that I'm personally excited or intrigued about or, think have a lot of potential. Most of these will be in industries that most people are not thinking of when they first stop to consider franchise ownership and, have something unique about them and that make it a really cool, interesting opportunity. So I'll do these, once a week or put at least a couple of these out per month. I get asked all the time as I'm having discussions with people that are curious about franchise ownership or considering franchise ownership. Well, Wes, what's the best franchise out there? What's the hottest franchise out there? And it's basically an impossible question to answer, especially, if I really take my role as a franchise consultant or a franchise advisor seriously, because, one thing I learned a very long time ago when it comes to franchising is simply that there's not a one size fits all approach to, what is the right franchise for an individual. My wife and I own a franchise, have built and sold another franchise business, and what works for us and what we're looking to get out of owning a franchise is not necessarily going to be the same as it is for the next person or any other person for that matter. It's also largely dependent on your strengths, your skill set, and even your weaknesses. Yes, you probably have them. God only knows I do. We all have things that we excel in, things that are really in our wheelhouse, and then we all have things that are weaknesses or we're not as strong in. We also just have things that we simply don't enjoy doing or would prefer to do less of. And that's really important to take into consideration as you're evaluating, different business opportunities and which one could be the right fit. So, before we dive into this segment today, I just want to preface all of this, as I talk about the brand I'm going to spotlight today, as I talk about this in future brands, and even when I have, the founders and CEOs of the franchise brands that I work with on the show and I interview them, this is not meant to be me promoting these franchises in the sense of, hey, if you're listening to this means Wes says you should go buy this franchise. That's not the case at all. These shorter spotlight segments are really just, me trying to highlight brands that I think are cool and interesting and probably very different from what most people are thinking of when they think of a franchise. And I'm going to, highlight what I like about them, what I find attractive about them. But again, that doesn't mean that I'm recommending that any and everyone go out and buy this franchise. So, my process as I help someone navigate learning about franchising and assessing if franchise ownership is the right direction for them. We work through a very thorough, very consultative process where, everything that I touched on earlier and much, much more is discussed in order for me to learn enough about the individual and, what their goals are, what their experience and again, their strengths and their skill sets are. And, what are they really looking to get out of business ownership? What other responsibilities, are they going to have in addition to owning a business? What type of lifestyle are they looking for? Like all of these are things that I need to learn and take into account for the individuals that I work with before I can come back and make a any sort of a recommendation in terms of which franchise brands I think could be a good fit for them. So hopefully that all makes sense. But I did think it would be cool to, just every week or a couple times a month, spotlight different brands that are on my radar and have my attention, and talk a little bit about why. Also, last piece of housekeeping, and then we'll get into it. I'm not gonna use the brand names as I talk about these. I'm just going to, kind of tell you about the characteristics of the business, why I find it unique or attractive. If the brand I'm talking about piques your interest, reach out to me. There's a link in the show notes uh, for a form where you can fill out your contact info, and that'll get to me. There's a calendar link in the show notes. I mean, there multiple ways you can get in touch with me. So if you're interested in learning more about a particular brand, reach out to me that way. Because in addition to everything else I mentioned about, what needs to really be taken into consideration before I'm comfortable recommending a specific brand to a specific person, there's other variables too. One of the big ones being territory availability, right? Most of these franchise brands run what they call a protected territory model. Okay. So if they've sold a territory or multiple territories in an area, those are no longer available. They're off the map, so to speak. So that's something I always look into for the people that I'm working with before I recommend brands. I'm going to confirm that they still have viable territory available in the areas of interest, because if they don't, then even if the brand itself may be a really good fit, it's almost a moot point unless you're open to relocating, which most people are probably not. So anyways, now that the housekeeping's out of the way, and hopefully that kind of sets the stage, the brand I'm going to talk about today is unique for a number of reasons, but one of them being is it's probably the most passive franchise business that I personally work with. All right, and I'm going to clarify that because I have conversations pretty often with people that are poking around at franchising, but in talking to them, I realize they have pretty unrealistic expectations when it comes to what their time input would need to be, both upfront and on an ongoing basis. And I'm always very, very quick to tell people that franchise ownership, business ownership in general, is really not passive. It should not be viewed as a passive investment opportunity, right? If you're buying into a franchise, this is not putting your money into the market or putting your money with uh, an investor or a money manager. This is not real estate, right? This is a living, breathing, ups and downs business, right? Any business out there is going to require people, right? A team of some sort. If the business doesn't require a team, then it's probably you're more of a solopreneur, right? Which means you're trading your time for money, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? There's a lot of businesses like that out there that can be very, very lucrative, and you can make very good money for your time, but far from passive, right? Because it requires you putting your time in exchange for the outcome. So when we talk about franchising, there's nothing that's passive, right? And you have to really dig into any specific franchise opportunity and understand realistically what it's going to take from you as the owner from a time input standpoint. What types of activities are you going to be spending your time on in order to get the type of results that you would want? Okay. So all that being said, this is, probably the closest thing to a passive or semi-passive franchise that I have, but to be extra clear, still not passive. Okay. All right. But this is kind of a route management business, right? So, checks a few boxes for me that I think are really interesting. One of which is, there's no brick and mortar. It's not a storefront type business. You don't have to go out and, find real estate. You don't have to sign any type of a long-term lease. It checks the green box, the going green box, right? This is a business that is eco-friendly and, can help reduce unnecessary landfill waste, right? This is a route management business essentially, right? So, the franchisee is investing in inventory, right, of these containers that are strategically placed throughout their territory, and the franchisor helps with finding the right types of locations to place these containers in this inventory, at which point they sit there and they collect from not even customers because they're not paying for it. Just call it, you know, consumers, people that are just out and about in their business. They're collecting clothes and shoes and things that people are looking to get rid of, maybe donate, but they don't want to just go throw it in the landfill. Okay. So what does all that mean? Well, number one, route management. You've got these bins or these containers that are out there collecting essentially what becomes inventory for the franchisee that they will then turn around and sell. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like here in a moment. But this means it's a labor light model, right? If these bins and these containers are collecting the inventory that the franchisee then sells, that means you don't need a bunch of employees out there selling or installing a product or, directly providing a product or a service to the customer. This particular brand says that, really the franchisee would need 2 part-time employees in order to launch this business, and can even get away with maybe just 1 part-time employee if the franchise owner is willing to put in more of their time and do some of the work themselves. So that being said, this brand has got phenomenal technology incorporated into the business. Technology from a route management standpoint, from measuring the amount of inventory that has been collected in these containers, knowing when you need to send someone out to check a container. How frequently are people contributing to the containers, right? All of this is done through proprietary technology, an easy to use app on, the franchisee's cell phone or computer. So again, labor light in that you're not paying people to drive around constantly and check these things. Through the technology, you're able to see which of your containers need attention and which don't. And then they've got national buyer programs, or essentially national accounts, where again, you're collecting these items, shoes, clothing, things like that. This is not like a thrift business where you then have to warehouse these things and pay someone to go through it and determine what out of it is sellable and what's not sellable, and determine a price for the things you're going to. There's none of that. That sounds like a absolute disaster to me. They have national accounts or national buyer programs with agreed upon pricing, and they're selling this in bulk to those customers, and it's all based on weight. And in addition to that, there's going to be opportunities for any franchisee in their own local market to get out there and develop local relationships with buyers of these products also. So given everything I've said, there's really this is not a marketing and advertising intensive business, right? You really don't have to do any of that. And you scale the business, you grow the business through continuing to invest in inventory of these containers. This is very similar to like a rental model, right? Which is very attractive in many cases because of the way the economics work. Obviously you have a cost for, the equipment or the container in this case, right? But over time, as that container earns more and more revenue for you, you've paid that off. So over time, your profit margin has the potential to increase as you have less and less, and ultimately no cost associated with your equipment or your inventory and containers that are out there in the field. This results in a relatively flexible role for the franchise owner, right? I mean, one or two part-time people that are kind of driving around checking up on your containers and grabbing the inventory out of them when they're full. There is some analytics that the franchisor and their software provides that's very, very valuable, but it does require some of the franchisees' time and attention. As I've mentioned, this is a route management business, so you want to make sure that these containers are in the right areas where they're visible, they're getting enough traffic, and they're not sitting there for too long without filling up with product or inventory. So, there may be instances where the franchise owner wants to reassess, where they have their containers placed and, go move the containers or make arrangements for the containers to be moved. Depending on where you want to put it, I know I've heard this franchisor say, that the parking lots of a Whole Foods is a great example of, a perfect area to place one of these. You may have to reach out to the business owner or the landlord and negotiate some sort of an arrangement to, place your container there. So those are the types of things that the franchise owner is focusing on. So obviously not entirely passive, right? This is not investing some money and then checking on it a year or two later to see if you've gotten any return on that investment. There are employees, even though it may not be a huge number of them. There is, some vendor relations or, figuring out where to place the containers. It's, making sure you have enough buyers lined up for the product. But compared to so many other franchises out there, compared to so many other businesses, it's fairly flexible, it's fairly passive. This is, to me, a great, kind of additional revenue stream. So if you already have a business or, if you have a corporate career and you're not quite ready to, really invest significant amounts of time in starting a franchise or a business, this could be a really good stepping stone. I wouldn't recommend this franchise for someone that's looking to entirely replace an income and do it quickly, right? It's a very high margin potential business, but it does take some time, for the monthly or even annual revenues to, amount to what, for most people would replace their income, right? You've got to, continue to add inventory of containers. You've got to turn those things over enough times, before the revenue really starts to amount to enough where, the owner's gonna be able to realize, a significant income. So long term, I think it's got great potential given how much time, it would require from the owner. I think it's got great potential. I wouldn't, recommend this as someone's full time or sole business endeavor, but I think it's got a lot of potential. For many people that would be out there looking for another revenue stream. This is a business that you can sell at some point, right? If you've done a good job with, the number of units that you have out and the placement of those units. I mean, very easy to demonstrate and to track how much revenue each bin is generated over a period of time. So definitely the type of business where, over time, this can be an asset that you could turn around and sell at some point. So if this particular franchise sounds interesting to you, like I said, reach out to me. Would love to share more about it with you, talk a little bit more about you and some of your goals and just where you're at. And, together we can decide if this particular brand may be worth you learning more about, in which case I can easily get you introduced to the right people over with the franchisor. Um, if this one doesn't particularly strike you as interesting, keep in mind, guys, I work with hundreds of different franchise brands across so many different industries. The investment range is all over the board with these different franchises, meaning, not every franchise out there is, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 plus investment, right? There's some great what we call lower cost franchise opportunities that still have big potential and that can still grow and scale into big business opportunities. So, would love to talk to anyone that's curious about franchise ownership, wants to get a sense of, what's out there that may be a good fit for them. As I kind of mentioned earlier in this, I've got a very thorough process that I work through with people to help them learn what they need to know about franchising, to know if it's worth really digging into and investigating. And we work through a very methodical process to get clear on exactly what it is you want to get out of business ownership, exactly what are the characteristics of a franchise business that would make the most sense for you, and what would your ideal role as the business owner look like? What would your ideal day, week, month look like as a business owner? And once we establish those things, it's very easy for me to recommend specific brands that are going to be very strongly aligned with what we've determined is most important for you, and ultimately, what your goals are. So would love to talk to you if you're interested in exploring any of that in more detail. And until then, thank you for tuning into the podcast. Uh, Please make sure to like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. You know the drill. We'll see you next time. Go drop in.